The FBI said it was a man. Law enforcement said it was a man. Every single creator covering this case said it was a man. And for 5 weeks, the entire world looked for a man. But what if they have all been staring at the wrong gender? What if the person who orchestrated one of the most shocking crimes in recent American history isn't the person in the mask? What if the real architect of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is a woman? A woman who was there the night it happened. A woman who knew the house, who knew the cameras, who knew the routine, who knew the gate, who knew the pacemaker, who knew that Nancy wouldn't be missed until morning. A woman whose name has barely been mentioned. A woman named Annie. For 5 weeks, the internet has pointed in one direction. Tommaso Cioni, Dominic Evans. 2 men, 1 band, 1 night. The theory that drove millions of views across dozens of channels. And I understand why. Tommaso Cioni was the last known person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. He drove her home on the night of January 31st and watched her go inside. Dominic Evans, his bandmate in a group called Early Black, whose debut album is literally titled Life, Love, Love, Murder, matched the physical description of the suspect in FBI footage. Felony criminal record, similar height, a tattoo that online sleuths spent weeks comparing frame by frame. These are not small details. These are the details that launched 1,000 videos. But here is the question that nobody asked. If Tommaso Cioni planned this, who told him where every camera was placed? If Dominic Evans walked onto that porch at 2 in the morning, who told him which camera to disable first? Who knew Nancy's pacemaker was connected to a phone app, an app that would ping if she moved? Who knew the exact layout of that house? Who knew Nancy wouldn't be missed until her church group noticed she wasn't on Sunday morning livestream? The masked man on that porch didn't guess any of that. He knew it. And the person who knew all of it wasn't standing on the porch. She was asleep, at home, 10 minutes away. Her name is Annie Guthrie. She is Nancy's eldest daughter. She is Tommaso Cioni's wife. She is the woman this entire case keeps circling back to. And she is the woman that almost no media has made the center of their story. Until now. I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. Annie Guthrie has been officially cleared by the Pima County Sheriff's Department. In a February 16th statement, Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed that the entire Guthrie family, all siblings and spouses, have been cleared as suspects. I am not telling you Annie Guthrie is guilty. I am not accusing her of anything. What I am doing is asking the questions that the evidence keeps raising. Questions that have not been answered. Questions that this community deserves to examine carefully and honestly. Because when you look at everything that happened on January 31st and February 1st, one name keeps appearing in the background of almost every critical detail. And that name is Annie. Annie Guthrie is not famous. That is, in part, what makes her so interesting. She is Nancy's eldest daughter, sister of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie. But Annie exists in a different world entirely. A poet, a jeweler, a metalsmith running her own studio in Tucson. Married to Tommaso Cioni since 2006. 1 son. A quiet life built around art, education, and family. In a 2013 interview, Annie called Tommaso her greatest teacher, her great manifester. Family photos from Christmas 2025, 5 weeks before Nancy disappeared, show the whole family together. Matching pajamas, dogs, Tommaso standing beside his mother-in-law, smiling. From the outside, this looks like an ordinary family, and it probably is. But here is where the story changes. Nancy Guthrie lived alone in the Catalina foothills, a quiet, unincorporated community in Tucson. She had staff members who helped her. She had limited mobility. She was 84 years old. She had a pacemaker connected to a phone app that could track her in real time. Nancy Guthrie was not a random target. Whoever came to that house on the night of January 31st into February 1st was not guessing. They were not casing randomly. They were not testing their luck. They came with a plan. They came with a map. They came with inside knowledge that could only come from someone embedded in Nancy's life. And on the last night Nancy Guthrie was seen alive, she was at Annie's house, for dinner, playing games, visiting with family, just like normal. She left Annie's home at 9:48 p.m., driven home by Tommaso Cioni. Less than 4 hours later, the masked man appeared on her porch. Let me walk you through the timeline carefully, because when you lay it out, minute by minute, something starts to feel wrong. 5:32 p.m. Nancy Guthrie leaves her home in an Uber. Destination: Annie's house. Dinner and games with the family, as Sheriff Nanos described it. Just visiting. 9:48 p.m. Tommaso Cioni drives Nancy home. He drops her off. The garage door opens. She goes inside. It closes 2 minutes later. He waited and watched. He says he saw her safely inside. 1:47 a.m. Nancy's doorbell camera disconnects. Not a power cut, not a system error. Disconnected. 2:12 a.m. Software detection on the camera logs movement at the front door, but the system has been overwriting its own recordings. There is no footage. 2:28 a.m. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnects from its phone app. Somewhere in those 41 minutes between the camera and the pacemaker, Nancy was taken from her home. The temperature in Tucson that night was 39 degrees, dark desert cold. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood silent. No traffic. No witnesses. Just a masked man who knew exactly where he was going and exactly what he needed to do when he got there. Now, let me ask you something. How does someone know to disconnect a doorbell camera at 1:47 in the morning? How does someone know there is a pacemaker connected to a phone app that will show law enforcement exactly where Nancy moved and when? How does someone know that the camera doesn't store footage in the cloud because Nancy didn't pay for the premium subscription? A stranger doesn't know those things. A stranger cases a house. A stranger looks through windows. A stranger might know there is a camera. But a stranger does not know which camera company Nancy uses, does not know whether it records to cloud, does not know to disable it before approaching, does not know the pacemaker is a secondary tracker that needs to be addressed. That is insider knowledge. That is the knowledge of someone who has been inside that house, who has talked to Nancy about her devices, who knows how she lives. The FBI asked Nancy's neighbors for surveillance footage from a specific date, January 11th, between 9 p.m. and midnight. That was 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. 3 weeks before. Why January 11th? What happened on January 11th? Was someone watching the house? Running reconnaissance? Checking sight lines, camera positions, entry points? And who would be driving through that neighborhood at night without drawing suspicion? Who would know January 11th was relevant? I'm not going to tell you the answer. I'm going to let you sit with the question. Now let me walk you through what has been publicly documented about Annie Guthrie since her mother disappeared. I want to go in order, weakest to strongest. So by the time we get to the end of this section, you understand the full picture. Piece number 1. The bag. The first thing that was publicly noted happened on February 7th. Officers from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Annie Guthrie's home. This was confirmed by authorities as part of the normal course of the investigation. But here is the detail the headlines buried. Officers were seen leaving Annie's home shortly after 10:30 in the evening. One deputy was wearing blue latex gloves. They left with a bag. What was in the bag? No one has said. Not officially. Not specifically. The bag went with the investigators. And the investigation moved on. But think about that image for a moment. Blue latex gloves. A bag. 10:30 at night. You wear blue latex gloves when you are handling evidence you do not want to contaminate. You take a bag when you have found something you need to take with you. What did they take from Annie Guthrie's home? Piece number 2. The photos. The second thing happened on February 8th, just one day after investigators left with that bag. Annie Guthrie appeared to have privatized or deleted family photos from her social media. Multiple photos, including images of Tommaso, were no longer visible to the public. Why? Why that day? Why those photos? Why Tommaso specifically? I am not saying deleting photos is proof of anything. People grieve in private. People disconnect from social media in crisis. That is understandable and human. But the timing is a question worth asking. Piece number 3. The cameras. After the public speculation began, after the media started naming Tommaso, after the internet started pointing at the Cioni household, Annie and Tommaso added new security cameras to their home. After, not before. Nancy Guthrie had cameras on her home. One of those cameras was disabled by the masked suspect. The absence of camera coverage is precisely what made this crime possible. And Annie Guthrie's response to that threat was to add cameras to her own home. What does that tell you about what she believed the threat level was? Who was she afraid of? Piece number 4. The ransom note. Multiple ransom notes were sent to media outlets. They demanded $6 million in Bitcoin. They contained 2 deadlines, both of which passed by February 9th. But here is the detail buried in the reporting. Federal sources described the ransom notes as containing precise personal details about Nancy and her home. Precise, personal details. The note wasn't generic. It wasn't the work of someone who Googled Nancy Guthrie and wrote a demand letter. It contained specific things, things that required knowledge, things that required proximity, things that required family. Piece number 5. 2.5 hours. The FBI investigators searched Annie Guthrie's home for approximately 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours is not a routine visit. That is not paperwork and a courtesy conversation. That is a thorough search. They arrived, they looked, they stayed, and they left with a bag and a deputy wearing blue latex gloves. No charge was ever filed. Annie was officially cleared along with the rest of the family. But the fact that the search happened at all, the length of that search, the fact that something left with them in a bag, those are facts. And those facts deserve questions. Before we get to the part of this video I have been building toward, the piece that I believe changes how you understand this entire case, I want to ask you something directly. Right now, having heard everything so far, what do you think investigators found in that bag? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm going to be reading every single one, and I want to know if this community sees what I see, because what comes next is the question that no one in mainstream media or online true crime is asking clearly. Before we go further, I want to say this clearly. Everything I present is a framework for discussion, not a conclusion. Annie Guthrie has been officially cleared by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, along with the entire Guthrie family. I am not saying she planned this. I am not saying she knew about this. I am not accusing her of any crime. What I am doing is asking the questions that the publicly documented evidence keeps raising, and inviting this community to think critically alongside me. If you have information relevant to this case, please contact the FBI directly. The tip line is anonymous. The reward is real. Now, here is the question nobody is asking. Here is the framework I want to present to you. Not as a fact, as a question. What if the most important person in this case was never the man on the porch? Think about how this crime worked. Not who did it, how it worked. Someone knew Nancy would be dropped off at approximately 9:48 p.m. They knew when she would be alone. Someone knew the doorbell camera did not record to cloud because Nancy didn't pay for the subscription. They knew disabling it would eliminate the footage. Someone knew the pacemaker was connected to a phone app and would need to be dealt with. Someone knew the gate would potentially be unlocked because Tommaso had driven through it and may not have secured it behind him. Someone knew the layout of the home well enough to approach the front door confidently in the dark at 2 in the morning. Someone knew Nancy's health limitations, that she had limited mobility, that she would be manageable. Someone knew she wouldn't be missed until morning, until the church live stream, until Sunday. Every single one of those details requires intimate knowledge of Nancy's life. And every single one of those details was available to the people sitting at Annie Guthrie's dinner table on the evening of January 31st. Now, I am going to say clearly, being at that dinner table is not a crime. Having that knowledge is not a crime. Knowing someone's routine is not suspicious on its own. But when you combine the dinner, the knowledge, the timeline, the search of Annie's home, the bag that left with investigators, the deleted photos, the precise details in the ransom note, the addition of security cameras after, not before, when you combine all of that into one picture, the picture keeps bringing you back to the same question. Who gave the man on the porch his instructions? The FBI said it was a man on the porch. The forensic analysis confirmed it. I am not disputing that. I am not saying Annie Guthrie was physically present in that mask. I am asking, who was the architect? Because every successful crime of this complexity has one. The person who executes is rarely the person who plans. The person standing in the driveway at 2 a.m. is rarely the person who assembled the map, the timing, the knowledge, the motive. The question this community should be asking is not just, who was the man on the porch? The question is, who handed him everything he needed to do it? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. She was cleared. The sheriff said so. The entire family was cleared. If Annie Guthrie was involved, she would have been charged. And that is a completely fair point. I respect it. But let me walk you through what being cleared actually means in an active investigation. When Sheriff Nano said on February 16th that the entire Guthrie family, all siblings, all spouses, had been cleared as suspects, he was making a specific statement. He was saying they are not considered the primary suspects at this stage of the investigation. Cleared reflects what investigators could confirm at that time. It means that based on the evidence available at that point, law enforcement did not have grounds to charge anyone in the family. It does not mean the investigation stopped asking questions, and it does not mean those questions have been answered. This investigation is still active. As of March 2026, no suspect has been publicly named. No arrest has been made. The case has been handed to a task force including Pima County homicide detectives and FBI agents. Investigators are described by the sheriff himself as definitely closer, but they are not there yet. The ransom note. DNA. The glove. DNA recovered 2 miles from the home. 2 separate profiles, neither publicly matched. The 10,000 hours of surveillance video the FBI is reviewing, in real time, because the tools can't do it automatically. A car on a Ring camera, approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's home, at around 2 a.m. on the night she was taken. Not yet identified. This case is not solved. This case is not closed. The questions are not answered. And the most important question, who had the inside knowledge that made this crime possible, has never been publicly addressed by anyone in law enforcement. That question remains open. And that is why this community's analysis matters. Let me close with the 2 pieces of evidence that investigators believe will ultimately crack this case. The DNA black glove was recovered approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. Inside that glove, a DNA profile. One that does not match Nancy. One that belongs to someone else. That profile has been sent to a private forensic lab in Florida. Investigators intend to run it through CODIS, the National DNA Database, using forensic genetic genealogy. Forensic genetic genealogy is the same technology that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of evading detection. It works by finding partial matches, distant relatives who shared DNA with the suspect, and building a family tree backwards until it reaches the person. That technology doesn't care who has been cleared publicly. It doesn't care what a press conference said. It follows the biology. If the person who wore those gloves is in that database, or if a relative of theirs is, this case ends with a name. The cell towers. Law enforcement has been systematically reviewing cell tower records from the Catalina foothills area for the night of January 31st into February 1st. Every phone that pinged a tower in that area during that window is a data point. Every phone that was present near Nancy's home, near Annie's home, near the route between them is a data point. Cell towers do not lie. They do not have alibis. They record what they record. At some point in this investigation, the cell tower data and the DNA data will be placed next to each other. And when they are, they will either confirm what law enforcement already suspects, or they will open a completely new direction. Either way, the science is patient. The science does not clear anyone permanently. The science follows the truth wherever it leads, and when it leads somewhere, this case will be solved. Here is where I want to leave you. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has limited mobility. She was taken from her home in the middle of the night. As of this recording, she has been missing for over 5 weeks. Her family has offered $1 million for information leading to her recovery. The FBI is offering $100,000 separately. If you know anything, if you saw something, heard something, noticed something, call the FBI tip line. Submit it through the FBI's online portal. Tips can be completely anonymous. The reward can be paid in cash. Because at the end of this video, the most important thing is not the theory. It is not the evidence ladder. It is not the question of Annie or Tommaso or anyone else. The most important thing is bringing Nancy home. And this community, this channel, this audience, you have consistently been ahead of the mainstream narrative on cases like this. So I want to ask you 3 questions before you leave. 1. Who do you think handed the masked man his instructions? 2. What do you think investigators found in that bag when they left Annie Guthrie's home? 3. Is there a detail I missed, something you found, something you've noticed, that this community needs to know? Drop it all in the comments. I read every single one, and I will be back with an update on this case the moment something breaks. If you are new here, subscribe, because this story is not over, not even close. And the next video I make on this case is going to be built on what this community finds in these comments. We are not just watching this story, we are working it.